Welcome to the latest episode of the Forecast in 5. I'm your host, Seth Katz. Joining us today is Steve Sherline. Steve serves as Senior Vice President and Regional Wealth Managing Director for Comerica Wealth Management's Southern California market. With more than 30 years of professional experience, Steve leads a team of private wealth advisors with the goal of helping clients reach their financial goals through planning, investment management, private banking, trust services, insurance, and integrated financial solutions. Steve also holds the designation of Certified Financial Planner. Welcome, Steve. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thanks, Seth. Good to be with you.
Excellent. Well, let's get started with some questions. Comerica Bank was founded in Detroit in 1849 as a savings bank for the working class and has seen remarkable growth over the past 175 years to become one of the top 25 largest commercial U.S. financial holding companies. What do you believe has contributed to Comerica's success?
Well, that's a great question, Seth. And, Comerica is certainly a classic American story. It started, as you mentioned, as a savings bank for workers in Detroit, Michigan, and those workers started their own businesses. Comerica was a leader in supplying credit for those businesses to bloom. And at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, Comerica was a key source of capital for many in the automotive business that formed. Now, since that time, Comerica's growth really has been fueled by its goal of being the best bank for business. And today, while we still have many large companies as clients, our focus is really in kind of the middle market, from small business startups that go up to $10 million in annual revenues. We also serve primarily middle market businesses that are, let's call it 10 million to 500 million in annual revenues. That's really the meat and potatoes of Comerica's business. We also have business banking in addition to the middle market teams. And of course, we continue to be in the corporate banking business, which focuses on businesses that are over 500 million in annual revenue. Now, we also have a very significant retail branch footprint, but the focus of the institution is on serving business owners and the employees of those companies.
Thanks for sharing that overview. While Comerica has had a presence in California since 1991, it recently added the private wealth management team that you've been leading. What do you feel separates Comerica from its competition?
Well, again, that's right. Comerica has been in California for more than 30 years, and we entered the market by making strategic acquisitions of existing banks. But really, we've grown organically over the last 20 years. And the private wealth management division was originally designed to support the owners and employees of the business customers we served in the commercial bank, but has evolved into its own entity, a family office style wealth management team that has a deep set of trust services and wealth planning services that hadn't existed until the last 20 years. The thing that I think is special about Comerica Wealth is something we call One Comerica. Most of our competitors go to market with business owners to develop deposit and lending solutions for business owners, but our intention is to deliver much more than that. I like to call it the 4 pillars of delivery. We talk to clients about delivering for the business, the C-suite, the employees, and the employees' families. So when we talk to businesses or real estate investors or families with multi-generational wealth, we can guide them through the full life cycle from the business startup to the business succession and for management of their corporations from kind of the initial wealth building stages to managing all aspects of multi-generational wealth. A great example of this is that many of those families from the automotive business in the early Detroit days that started with us in the late 1800s are still with us today, more than 150 years later.
Fantastic. As a senior executive who serves in a capacity where you lead an entire region for a national financial services company, what do you believe are some of the attributes one should possess if they have aspirations to advance into a leadership role like you have?
Well, boy, that's a big question. And there's a sea of opinions on this topic. But from my seat, I think I'd narrow it down to 3 big things. The first one is credibility. The second is adaptability. And the third is personalization. So credibility is more than just your resume. It's about your ability to inspire a shared vision for your business. You have to know the business, and I believe you have to walk in the shoes of the people you lead to be kind of optimally effective as a leader. In our industry, that means you have to have the ability to look beyond the balance sheet. and know how to connect with people regarding their most important hopes and dreams. Advising is kind of first a meeting of the hearts before it's a meeting of the minds. So people need to know that you care about them before they'll trust you with their planning or with their assets. The second item is adaptability. And this one may be the most important of all the abilities. The wealth management business is a constantly changing sea of information that we have to digest and simplify that in a way to allow our clients to make informed decisions on a regular basis. We guide clients through constant change, and as a person's ability to learn and adapt is kind of a constant requirement. This is even more true with people when you're leading them. Every generation has its own uniqueness and its own value. As a leader, you have to tune into the changing norms of your people and your clients, and you can't get left behind. I love to remind people that most get the Darwin principle of survival of the fittest wrong. Most interpret this as the strong survive. To the contrary, Darwin meant that those who are able to adapt best to a changing environment survive, not necessarily the strongest. So adaptation is key. This third principle of personalization is one I talk about a lot. Most leaders use kind of a golden rule approach to leadership. I like to guide people to something that is more the platinum rule. The golden rule says that you treat others the way you'd like to be treated. And this is valid, but maybe incomplete because your teams aren't from your generation often. They're not exactly like you. So using the platinum rule, you would know your people well enough that you treat them in a way that they want to be treated, which means the leader has to use different styles and with each person that they lead. And this approach encourages the hearts and minds of your team. And frankly, it creates followership, which is the key. I hope that gives your people something to think hard about.
Those really solid answers, Steve. That's going to be helpful for our students, and that's a nice segue into our next question. Since we have many Anderson MBAs watching, can you share why you believe a career in private wealth management is a profession that one should strongly consider?
Well, the short answer is yes. I absolutely believe that there is a place for these talented young people who are graduating from Anderson to enter the wealth management business, and I think it's still going to be a great place to be. The complexities of creating and managing wealth plans, tax ramifications, banking and lending, investments, the need for advice is accelerating, not decelerating. And this will always produce a need for great advisors. The bigger question today, though, is where should you enter the industry? There are more choices than there ever have been. I mean, do you want to enter through the private equity channel? Do you want to enter through a real estate investment channel? Do you want to go through the traditional investment advisor doorway? There are different pathways today than there were 30 years ago. So I would say absolutely there is a more than ever an opportunity to enter the business.
Especially, it's good that you shared those pathways because that's going to be helpful for our students. With the increased competition and ongoing changes that we're seeing within the wealth management and banking industry, where do you see the profession headed in the next decade?
Boy, that's a big question. And as I mentioned previously, change is inevitable. And I do see some somewhat dramatic changes on the horizon. There are kind of two big trends that I see continuing. The first is the expansion of online banks, discounters, fintechs. The entry point for private wealth is going to continue to rise, meaning the kind of the dollar point at which you enter and begin to use a private wealth advisor. I think this is largely due to the second trend, which is fee compression. The more efficiencies that come into the industry, the more it puts pressure on costs, and greater efficiency leads to changing business models. Though through kind of online services and AI, clients can get a lot of low cost, effective advice for many of the fundamental investment, savings, borrowing services. And I don't think this is going to slow down. I think it's going to accelerate. So over the last 30 years, I've seen the entry point for private wealth move from as little as $250,000 to, $3 million and above. Many of our key competitors are already moving to 10 million. So my sense is that number is going to continue to rise due to fee compression. And the winners are always going to find ways to create value through comprehensive advice services that, create efficiencies and the global advice they provide to wealthy families. But I think the price point at which you get into those services is going to continue to rise. So my observation is that our industry is going to grow in two general ways. Companies are going to be focused on being narrow and deep and then distributing those services to the financial supermarkets, and those financial supermarkets that aggregate a wide range of services and seek to simplify the complexity for wealth families when they get above that line. And many of those people are business owners, which is why I think Comerica is really well positioned as a business first bank.
Very helpful overview, Steve. Well, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thanks so much, Steve, for taking out some time out of your busy schedule to be with us.
Glad to be here, Seth, and thanks for the opportunity to contribute.
Of course. And thanks to all our viewers for tuning in. We'll see you on the next episode of the Forecast in 5.